Resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. It's a fantastic quote by St. Augustine and the topic of today's episode. Today, we're going to be focusing on the idea of resentment and where it comes from, how it festers in us, and how often it all begins with a story that we tell ourselves internally, a fiction that we're creating without any obvious facts or bothering to find the truth of what's really going on. Over the last couple episodes, I've been thinking a lot about the general topics that I've been covering and also the conversations that I've had with so many men over the years about the struggles that we have, but also behaviors that we see in other people. And sometimes you just have to laugh. It's just the things that we do sometimes are baffling. I think about the great philosophers, in history: Aristotle, Aquinas, Augustine, Socrates. And you just know they were looking at their fellow man going, what the hell is wrong with them? That opening quote is actually from St. Augustine. It just really paints a picture of how in our hearts sometimes we are just like a child. These kinds of stories, these kinds of people, you think about your boss or you think about a coworker or someone in your family, and you think it's that they're just a product of their time. Oh, this person is a radical leftist, or this person's an evil conservative. But you take all that layering away, you take away the wrapper of the fiction that we're creating, and this goes back to the dawn of time. These types of behaviors are as old as humanity. It surpasses culture and era. It's just this same story repeating over and over again. And it's like we can never learn. We can never grow past these petty little behaviors that really bring us away from paradise. And however you view paradise, for me, I just see it as, in the material world, a contentment, being content with what you have. Anyway, I digress. Today we're going to be talking about resentment, and I actually have a fairly recent story that I need to get into, and a powerful learning lesson, a shameful one, but I'm going to lay it all out on the table for you, so don't judge me too harshly. Why do we demand the credit for the things that we've done? What is it in us that yearns for that recognition? And when we don't get it, and maybe someone else does, or our work or the things that we do go unnoticed, why does it eat away at our soul? And like Augustine said, resentment is like a poison. Welcome to the Sons of Men podcast, a conversation dedicated to meaning in the lives of men, offering a window into the trials of masculinity, where we talk about family, spirituality, creativity, and legacy to better understand each other and to offer solutions for the next generation in an increasingly shallow and hostile world. I'm your host, Curtis Wiebe, a father and husband, addict in lifelong recovery, and an advocate for men struggling in the shadow of suffering. This is episode 4, Tantrum. I'm going to go back a little bit to a very early time in, I suppose, where all of this started to first flourish. I talked about it in previous episodes that I had to surrender and submit myself to a greater good. It was a long process, I'll be honest. I made it sound like it was kind of instantaneous. There were some instantaneous things that happened, but it was mainly in the breadth of my relationship and within my family. And even that took some time. But to the point of today's conversation, I'm talking about the first test that I had, really. But it all started with really understanding the nature of the gift that I was given. And I want to speak quickly about what I mean by gift, actually. I realize that there could be some connotation around that isn't understood, or it maybe puts your mind in a different place than I'm meaning. I think we all have some inherent ability or interest, I think, what we naturally gravitate towards. For me, it was always the creative. In high school, I was a theater kid. I was in band. I was in a band called Gargamel Jones, R.I.P. Gargamel Jones. And I had friends that were into athletics and were incredible athletes. So I think we have a natural inclination towards certain behavior or interests, and gifts to me are sort of a higher level version of that. These are kind of these quieter skills that maybe are just so beneath the surface that we don't really recognize them. And I'm going to talk about mine today, so you'll probably better understand. So, with that aside, the first step out after submitting myself to a greater good was learning the nature of my gift. It was a few weeks after that surrender and starting to listen and open my heart and serving my family that I got an offer from a friend to help him in their studio with some creative issues that they were having. Now, it was pretty quick for my old friend Pride to resurface and immediately start spinning off into, well, yeah, of course they need me. I mean, I'm really good at this, so naturally. And I have to be honest, I kind of carried that with me. This is only a few weeks after the whole process of changing over, and I got into the first meeting with them, and I was listening to them talk about the project that they were working on, and right away that voice was in my head, like, nah, that's not the way I would do it. No, I mean that's a bad idea, like right away. And I felt in the moment, I was like, what am I doing? This is exactly against what I've been trying to unlearn. So I just was quiet and I listened to the conversation, and I realized that there was an issue of communication within the different groups of this company. And I found that really interesting. I felt that there had been something that had happened, that maybe some hurt feelings manifested, and maybe that's what I could actually help them with. Sure, I was there to help them creatively, of course, but that's what I'm talking about the layer one and the layer two. The layer one, the writer in me, the director in me, that's what I could help them with. But it was the layer underneath. It was the man who wants to lead and bring people together through conversation. Wow, that's my gift. But I didn't know it at the time. So, still convinced that I needed to be the writer, I had to fight this urge to fix the creative in the project when I actually think I needed to help them fix their communication. And so that's what I did. I consulted with them and I led a conversation that helped them start to understand each other better. They'd all come together to create this company after working in various other companies and being dissatisfied with the way things were run. And they thought they had some good solutions. And I agreed with them. They did. But I think somewhere along the way, they started to feel slighted, or there was some gaps and barriers growing because they weren't communicating. So I just helped them talk to each other, got them to share why they joined, share what they wanted from the venture. And over the course of a month, I saw them come back together. It was incredible. I remember coming home from these experiences and sharing with my wife, like, I'm not doing anything creative. I'm just helping these guys talk. And it was so rewarding. It was far more rewarding than helping them fix their story, for instance. And that was a revelation. I realized that my actual work there was to listen, aid them in speaking to each other, and help create an environment that let them air their worries and concerns. And when they were able to do so, the walls came down. Perceptions of slights or meaning or intent, those kind of faded over time as they just talked honestly with each other. This goes back to everything that I've been talking about throughout the entire podcast. It really works. When you can be vulnerable with each other, men, I guarantee you there's nothing you can't work through. It's hard and it hurts sometimes, but it works. So I walked away from that experience a new man, and I really felt that I understood what it is that I was meant to do. Yes, I'm a pretty good creative, but I'm actually a great listener, and I can understand words in an interesting way. I can write them, but I understand them when people speak them and get to the bottom of what those words mean. Just like earlier, I talked about gift and I defined that meaning so you understood what I was saying. I preface all of this lead up to what I'm going to call the actual test. And this is something that came up not even 2 weeks ago. Shortly after, I was offered another position. And this time it was as a creative lead, a studio that was struggling with their creativity. I was brought in by a friend that I had met years before in Sweden. And I took a few interviews and I spoke with a few of the team members, and I really felt a connection. I felt I had a place here, and there was incredible talent at this studio. And more than anything, I saw an opportunity to lead, to help these fantastically talented people come together around a united vision and deliver something that they were really proud of. That was what I saw. That was the opportunity. I would take all the lessons from this previous consulting gig and bring it here and help these people flourish. I was truly inspired by this team. And if you're listening, of course, you know who you are. And this podcast is a bit of an admission. Also, please don't judge me too harshly. While I was there, the project really found its footing. And I couldn't believe the energy that was happening, the ideas, the collaboration, people coming out of their shells. And it just was a really exciting, fun time. It became open, and people were courageous. And I was really, really trying hard to embody the values that I learned from my previous experience and this new understanding of this gift that I had. Everyone was bringing their best. And I was genuinely in awe of the magic that was coming together. Now, sadly, I have to admit that in the end, it didn't work out. There were a number of factors. I had been for a while feeling that I wanted to start my own business. And as you know, that didn't work out. But there was also some other issues that I was seeing pertaining to leadership that I had talked about in the previous episode. But long story short, I decided after about a 4-month stay before the project was finished to part ways. And that is when I founded my company and kind of spiraled off into the next era. I was really disappointed, to be honest. I really felt that this new opportunity was really where I was meant to be. But I think you have to be prepared in life to just go with the flow a little, especially when you're putting your trust in something greater than yourself. You just have to believe that each of these experiences is to sharpen you and to help you learn more about yourself. Well, I guess a year later I did. So what happened? A few weeks ago, I saw that the game was released. And I immediately started telling a story in my head about what was going on. They didn't credit me. I worked on that game. Where's my credit? They probably took my name off of it because they don't want to associate the game with me. I started acting like a child, to be honest. But the fact was, I hadn't spoken to anyone at the studio since I had left. I could have emailed, I could have asked, hey, what's the deal with the game? How's it coming? But I didn't. I started telling stories. I want to take a quick sidebar here. And I want you to think about this, if this is something that you do. Because I guarantee you do. I guarantee it, because I do it all the time. Resentment comes from a place of assumption. So when you're at home and you do a task around the house or you do something for your family and nobody recognizes it. Maybe it was something that you were really proud of that you thought, hey, my family, they'll really notice that I put in this effort today. And no one does. There's really only two ways you can go with this. The first is the bad way, which is to start telling a story. Well, they don't appreciate me around here. No one ever sees anything that I do. That's the first layer of resentment. And then you start telling further stories. You layer things on. No one appreciates me in this house. I work so hard for everyone and they take. And then you start layering on more until you find yourself poisoned against your own family or a friend or whatever, your workplace. And then the second way is to give grace. What is grace? Well, it's putting yourself in the mind or the role or the shoes of another person and going, well, where are they at? And also assuming the good. Assuming that your family does appreciate it. And even if they don't notice it, it makes your house, your home, a better place. And there's really only two ways you can go about it. I recommend the second way, but I'll tell you, I didn't take that option on this project. I was stewing in it at home here and seeing the news releases and seeing the positive reviews. That resentment was starting to really fester and I was sharing it. And I knew at the time, I knew I was becoming resentful and I didn't want that to taint the experience that I had had, but it was. The best way to destroy that resentment is to just do a little work and be a little courageous, reach out to people and say, hey, do you know if I got a credit on this? Or, hey, maybe even better, great job, guys. I'm really proud of you. And just leaving it at that, you know? But sure enough, the next day, I was tagged in a large post on Facebook by one of the leads on the project and thanking me for my efforts on the project. And sure enough, it sounded like I did get a credit. So I had to reflect pretty deeply on the process and the story that I was telling. How did it go down like that? How did I get to this place where I was telling stories about people that I had worked with in a way that wasn't true to my heart? The fact was, I had broken my own promise. I had taken the job to help people. The team, numerous members of the team were posting about it on LinkedIn and on Facebook, and it was very clear that everyone was extremely proud and excited about the release of this game that they'd worked so hard on. It was getting great reviews. It was being championed for its beautiful visuals, its great storytelling, its interesting puzzles. I should have been proud of them. I should have been glowing at their success. I talked about this in the last episode. As a leader, you have to celebrate successes of those who work with you, even if they surpass you. What a hypocrite I am. So what did I do? I had to kill that resentment. I had to kill the story that I was telling in my head because it was proven not to be true. I was thanked for my efforts. And even if that hadn't been the case, I needed to kill the resentment, and I had to acknowledge the goal that I set at the beginning to help these people enjoy making this game and be proud of it when it was done. And I had achieved that goal. So, what's the lesson? In life, in work, in play with your family or your communion with your community, create goals that are beyond your personal desires. Again, my coworkers created something that they're proud of. How can I not be happy with that success? And when I did let go of my resentment, when I let go of that poison, I found instead joy. And when you get into the hard times and when it feels like you're being taken advantage of, or people don't respect what you do, or people are ungrateful, remember the goal. Things aren't always going to work out the way you want, but go back to the goal that you set, because that's something you can hold yourself to. At the end, your heart is in the same place as it was at the beginning. And finally, talk with courage. What do I mean by that? Reach out. If you start telling stories in your head about your wife and what she's thinking, take a step back. Those kinds of fairy tales can cause some really deep divides in relationships, all relationships. Just ask. Be courageous. Hey, you said this and I feel like you meant this. Is that true? Find out if it's true. Get to the truth before resentment takes hold. It destroys this sort of petty behavior, this childlike behavior. We're storytellers. Human beings are storytellers. If you pay attention, you're doing it constantly. You're constantly interpreting the world around you. And you're often wrong. And that misinterpretation is dangerous. That's why I constantly encourage you to talk to a brother. Reach out. Hey, am I acting like this? I think that I'm doing good, but what do you think? Get a second opinion. Always get a second opinion, because your opinion can be quite tainted by your emotions. So, what kinds of resentments am I talking about here? Well, in the home, getting credit for doing things. Let me tell you, in a good, healthy relationship where each spouse serves the other in harmony, there's no need for a tally or a list of obligations. Sure, expectations. This is what I handle, this is what you handle, and sometimes we need to juggle each other's responsibilities, but obligations, keeping a list of I did these 3 things and she did these 2, and stop thinking like that. As I said before, don't tell stories. Give grace. Maybe your wife had a hard day. Step up. Maybe she's quietly hurting. Speak to her. Maybe a friend at work is struggling. He's biting everyone around him, causing a lot of chaos, and he said some things, and now you're telling stories about that guy at work. Sit down. Have a conversation. See where he's at. Listen. Ask good questions. I think at the base of all of this, communication is the key. Talk openly and honestly about your resentments. They are feelings. They aren't necessarily true. I keep coming back to storytelling. I think obviously because, oh man, I'm a writer. But it's kind of how I see the world, I guess. But I would really encourage you to look at the way you interpret the world and what kinds of stories you're telling in your head about the people around you, and qualify them. If there are a lot of unknowns in the relationships you have, and there's gaps where you're filling in that information with a little bit of narrative, I caution you. And I encourage you to fill those gaps by reaching out to the person and seeing where they're really at. When we do that, when we open ourselves up, like I said, that vulnerability can only bring you closer together with deeper understanding and wisdom. It helps us tell a better story because it's not your story. It's a shared story with everyone around you. Thank you for tuning in to the Sons of Men podcast, episode 4. I think a lot about how we go through the world, and we kind of tailor existence to our own desires and needs. It's the base human instinct. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, the great minds have been debating this from the ancient times. I encourage you to think on a higher level. Level 1, like I said, the conversation can be tiring. I think we're all starting to get tired of it. Leftists this, rightists that. He wears his hat on the right side. He wears his hat on the left side. I think we're all tired of it. What do you mean when you say that? What's actually the issue? I remember having a conversation with a friend really quickly before I wrap about this topic. I asked him when he was angry about things happening in the government from a political party he wasn't a fan of. I said, what are you really upset about? Behind it. Let's get rid of this first layer. And we talked through it, and you know what it was? Corruption. And that's not a left or right issue, friends. That is a human condition issue. So let's take the conversation to level 2. Maybe let's start figuring out what's going on behind the scenes, behind all of the actions that we take, and get to the root of the things that are bothering us today. Because I promise you, you're not going to find the solution with the guy that wears his hat on the right. And after that, when you're sick of him, it's not going to come from the answers who wears his hat on the left. It's a deeper question about the human condition. And I think here is a great place to start that conversation. Please reach out to me, sonsofmenpod@gmail.com. I've already talked to a few of you privately. It's been so exciting, so fun, actually, and meaningful to me, the things that you shared. Drop me an email if you want to be a guest. I already have 3 or 4 people that have reached out to me, and it's a very exciting time. I'm so happy that you're tuning in. I thought it might just be me, a microphone, telling a story to the wall, but here we are. Until next week, sit down and have a conversation with those you love. Check in on the stories that you're telling in your head and see if they're true. And if they're not, tell a better story. God bless.